CLNSradio.com, the home of Internet Sports Talk Radio.
I was just going to ask you about the Penn State scenario over there and how is it hitting the local area, because I'd imagine the story is just gigantic over in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean, completely. Everybody, to answer your question, in Pennsylvania, I mean, we have, here where I live in Scranton, we have 2 or 3 campuses right in my backyard. So Penn State University, the football program, has been ginormous to the people of PA, and especially in this region. As a young guy, I mean, we used to party out at State College all the time. You had the Joe Pa masks and the Joe Pa glasses. So I guess really to answer your question is everybody walked around for the first 2 days like they saw a ghost, and that was it was irrelevant whether you were a football fan, a sports fan at all, or just a human being, because I think the severity of the crime was so outrageous and so horrendous that any involvement or any knowledge that Joe Pa may have had, the first indication was you were heartbroken that this could have happened, especially at this stage in his career where really, he was winding down as a complete legend and just on the scene, he was breaking records at this point. And really everybody just kind of walked around like they saw a ghost. And you talk about cooler talk, water cooler talk, I mean, hell, you couldn't go anywhere without anybody bringing it up, regardless of age, gender, whatever. Didn't matter. Everybody was talking about it. So really hit home hard. The coverage continues on the local news here. Every night it's still the headline story. And everybody in this area, including myself, is just simply heartbroken, I'd say.
Well, are you heartbroken? Are you heartbroken because of the situation that occurred, or because Joe Paterno is no longer your football coach and the football program is on the decline?
To me, as a non-football fan, I couldn't care less about the football team. I think the severity of the crime, the perversion of it, and the fact that it was never handled in the proper way is what, and the fact that everybody's grandpa, Joe Pa, was involved in it. Not involved in it from a crime standpoint, but from not acting appropriatly at the time that this pervert, and I won't even say his name on this radio show to give him credit, was committing these horrible crimes. No, I do know how to say it, first of all. Second of all, I mean, I couldn't believe this morning on ESPN, you had people who were actually saying what a nice man this is. And he was spotted at the mall out in State College area wearing a Penn State sweatshirt. I mean, this guy obviously has a sickness. Supposedly, I mean, he's got the two, whatever it is. He's got that charity that's supposedly really good, and it's for kids. God, it sounds a lot like Michael Jackson to me. I mean, it's the stereotypical profile of a pedophile. God, it's heartbreaking.
Here's where I have.
Hi guys, I gotta go. So it was good to talk
Calvin,
to you guys. Hope you
thanks, man. Appreciate the call in, man.
Right.
We'll continue this conversation. Listen in.
All
right, Paul, what were you gonna say?
Well, here's the problem that I have. And it's with Joe Paterno. I mean, yeah, everyone loves him. He's an old man. He can barely walk, and he was still doing his best on the sideline, which, I mean, I'm sure Penn State fans respect that. But at the same time, this guy knew what was going on. Despite what anyone wants to say, he knew what was going on. He allowed it to continue. He put more victims. He created he let it happen. He let more victims suffer. As he didn't bring the story out to law enforcement officials, and he pretty much let the game of football get in the way of his morals. And
I don't know. Go ahead.
I mean, he respected his coach. He wanted that coach next to him. He knew if he went out and outed him, that he would no longer be working for him. He knew the university would obviously be in a lot of trouble, and he probably even could have lost his job at that time. I don't believe he should have at that time, but allowing it to happen for these years on end and not saying a word, I mean, I just think his legacy has to be destroyed. I do not respect Joe Paterno in any way, shape, or form.
Wow, strong words. I mean, I think first of all, to answer a couple of your comments there. First one I'd like to address is I don't believe, and believe me, thank God I wasn't privy to any of this, but I think Joe Paterno and Penn State University would have went forward regardless who was coaching underneath Joe Paterno. So it may have been more of a peer colleague issue, but it doesn't make the crime or the turning a blind eye to the crime any less severe. I mean, this goes beyond anything. I mean, you talk about a young kid and kids, plural, and using your position as an assistant coach for a major college football program as a way to exploit some of these kids is disgusting. Now, as far as Paterno goes, so again, going back to that, I don't think Joe Pa was worried about losing any member of his coaching staff. He reported it
How can you say he wasn't? He let that continue for one sole reason, because he trusted Sandvisky, or whatever the hell his name is, to coach his defense. And he knew that he was probably one of the best defensive coaches out there. He was comfortable coaching next to him.
If that was the case, Brandon, he would have certainly assumed that the president or the director, the athletic director, would have fired him immediately, and he should have been. And that's Joe Pa's error in all this, is that the man should have been fired and reported to the authorities. Instead, he went through the chain of command, and the chain of command failed him. And when it did, he took no steps further. So that's where Paterno lies in all this as guilty. So, I mean,
everyone who knew about the crime that was being committed is guilty here. No,
agreed.
I mean, the athletic director, anyone who knew what was going on, and I think it comes down to the point, Penn State is a university that prides itself on its Division I athletic program, and they let that get in the way of
the enrollment to I agree, and the enrollment to the university is very much contingent upon the success of the football program. And Joe Paterno has been a man who's donated multiple millions of dollars and been pivotal to recruiting college students to the school. Doesn't make the crime any less horrendous. It doesn't make turning a blind eye to the crime any less horrendous. But the fact of the matter is, this university turned a blind eye to a situation that should have been addressed in the 90s, the way I understand it. I mean, originally this went out to the district attorney, who said they had no case back in the late 90s. And then that attorney, I believe it was the DA, that attorney, or the attorney general, one of them, and you may not even know this story, he ended up MIA, missing in action, dude. He's gone. No one knows where he is. And the case was just dropped. So I think there's more to this story than anybody knows. But if we want to dwell on Paterno here, I mean, this is obviously a huge stain on his legacy, but it makes it no less heartbreaking and disappointing to Pennsylvanians who have had this man in their lives for 60 years. I mean, my grandfather watched Joe Paterno coach Penn State. I mean, so this guy has been embedded in 3 to maybe 4 generations of Pennsylvanians. So I'm certainly not coming out here and saying Joe Pa was wrongly fired. I think the university did the right thing by terminating him. I don't, maybe they didn't do it in the right way, but they did the right thing. But it makes it no less heartbreaking that this man was involved in this, even just from a knowledge standpoint. It's heartbreaking.
Well, yeah, and I think the way that I know it was a small minority of people following the firing that were acting like idiots, but I mean, those people just... It
wasn't a small minority, Brandon. You had a lot of kids out there acting like jackasses. And I'll tell you what, not to cut you off, but the media further escalated that situation, because it started out with ESPN being outside of Joe Pa's house and there was 20 or 30 kids, and the next thing you know they're pumping this up. Then there's a whole bunch of state college kids, probably half in the bags, tipping police cars over. I mean, so, go ahead. I cut you off. It is an emotional topic.
Those are the people that that I don't understand. They're taking their frustrations out, I mean, on vans and acting like idiots for what? The victims aren't going to feel any better by seeing that. That showed that they didn't care at all about the victims, and they were acting just like Penn State University had for numerous years.
They were college kids. They were residents of the campus. They were students. There was alcohol involved, I'm sure.
There wasn't. It was like a Tuesday night. I mean,
no, I'm sure that. Have you ever been to State College? I'm sure there was alcohol involved.
I don't know. I think that's an easy excuse, but either way,
I'm not negating. I mean, it's an American's right to protest whatever they want. Now, getting violent is not appropriate. But again, I believe that was media driven and escalated. And man, this is just such a difficult topic.
Whether it was media driven or whatever driven, they acted like complete fools, and they didn't even consider the victims. And like I was going to go on.
Well, do you know that the victims came out publicly and said that they did not want Paterno to be the pawn of Paterno's termination? You know, I mean, the victims have come out publicly and said that.
Well, whether they want it or not, we both agree that it should have happened because he knew about the situation. But
I believe that, and I want you to get to your point, I'm sorry, but I believe that the termination and the way that it occurred also fueled and escalated the riots. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. And like I was going to go on to say, I mean, the way those kids were acting, not focusing on the victims and focusing more on the fact that they lost their football coach, is pretty much how the university had acted throughout the time knowing this had happened. They cared more about the game of football and athletics than they did about the victims.
Brandon, I don't know that you could even compare the two. The university is so to blame and so wrong. The stupid kids that were out in the streets tipping over cars were just being kids. They were looking for any reason to go out and riot and act like fools because the media was fueling them to do that. And then on top of that, Paterno is the face of that university for 60 years. You took a guy who everybody was proud to be associated with Joe Pa, and it's been twisted and torn to a point where this man committed a crime by not reporting properly or following, I guess, the guidelines, the legal guidelines. And let's not forget, too, Joe Paterno in the state of Pennsylvania can be prosecuted just for not having reported that to the authorities. So this may not be over. Well, it's certainly not over.
It's certainly not over, and it shouldn't be over. I think there's still, like you said previously, there's still a lot to come out, and I don't even know how to say his name, and I don't really care how to say his name, but the defensive coach that was responsible for all this, I believe he was on NBC tonight at 10 o'clock giving an interview in which he was saying he was innocent, but then at the same time...
he's proclaiming his innocence, yeah.
So, I mean, there's still a lot to come out. There's going to be more people that come out with information, witnesses that may have seen the acts that he committed. So I still think there's a lot to go in this story, and I'm sure it's something we may be talking about more in the future.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Paul, let's go to a commercial break, come back, and we have one more. I'm all flustered now. What's the last interview we have to play?
We actually have two more interviews as we have time. We do want to get to the John Jennings interview, but we also have an interview with Chris Wright, the first-round pick. So what we'll do, we'll run to break, and then we'll come back.
Let's even skip the break. Paul, skip the break and just do the interviews.
Okay.
Sandusky
we'll go
is how you pronounce that bastard's name, Sandusky. Go ahead.
Yes. So yeah, we'll go right to the interview with John Jennings. This is the longest interview. It's about 12 to 13 minutes.
We have time after.
Yes, definitely worth listening to. He threw out some Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, and even some Red references as far as dancers and